regulation, and then how you can do it for yourself as a grown-up, so then you're able to help your children do it, and then I'll give you some tools at the end of like specific things you can do in the moment when your child's dysregulated. Okay, so I wanted to start with a quote. We are either giving love or asking for it, and I know that being a parent is, well, I don't know because I'm not a parent, but it's the hardest job in the world, I think. I get to see your kids during the day, and then I get to leave, but you take them home and you deal with them all day, so you're doing amazing, and it's hard to be a kid, and so when they're having those really tough times, I think it's important to remember that that's just them asking for love, they're asking for connection, even when it's in a way that doesn't feel good, you know, so. Okay, what is emotional regulation? I feel like this is a word that gets thrown around a lot, but the definition that I found on like a psychology website is the conscious or unconscious processes of monitoring, evaluating, modulating, and managing emotional experiences and expression of emotion in terms of intensity, form, and duration of feelings, emotion-related physiological states, and behaviors. So basically, because that's a lot of words, I don't really know what that means. It is the ability to do something with your feelings that's like appropriate, you know? So like when you have emotional regulation skills, you're able to handle your emotion in ways that are like societally acceptable, basically. So dysregulation is when you're not emotionally regulated, the opposite of that. This is what Emma showed us last time. So your brain has 3 states. You can either be in the executive state, which is the front of your brain, where you're able to make decisions, you're in your prefrontal cortex, you're able to learn at this state, things are good, you can solve problems. Your emotional state is behind that, and then the question that you're asking is, am I loved? So when kids are in their emotional state, they're worried about feeling loved. And then the last state is your brainstem, and that's your survival state, and that's, am I safe? So when we're working with kids who are dysregulated, they're either usually in their emotional state or in their survival state. So they're asking, am I loved or am I safe? So dysregulation is the inability to emotionally regulate. Emma talked last time about triggers, or like she had a clacker, and when you're triggered, your clacker's going off. So something that's happening is like making you feel super dysregulated. It's like my trigger. If I get like hit in the nose, like that is like a big trigger for me. I'm like, oh, it hurts so bad. Some kids like get triggered for like different sounds or just different things. But it's important to know your triggers. We'll talk about that a little bit too. Or if a kid is sensory overloaded, that can also cause a lot of dysregulation. So like some kids, if they have their sock and it feels weird, like that can dysregulate them for the whole day. So there's different sensory experiences that can cause dysregulation too. Okay, so how can I emotionally regulate for myself so that I can help my kids do it? That's like the most important step, is to be able to notice your own emotional regulation skills so that you can help your kids do it. I feel like growing up, like this was not a thing that was taught necessarily in my household. We didn't teach it at school. We didn't do like breaths or anything at school. So this might be a new thing for you, and that's totally okay. The first thing is to get comfortable with your own feelings. If you're having a feeling that feels like painful or uncomfortable and then you're resisting it, you're just causing yourself to suffer more rather than experiencing the pain and dealing with that emotion. And everything you bury gets buried alive. So if you're like, oh, I don't need to feel that, you do, unfortunately. So sorry. No feelings are bad feelings. Some can feel uncomfortable, but it's important to feel all of your feelings. The next thing you should do is notice your own triggers. So if you know, like, your kid talking back to you really triggers you, but you have a partner in the home who doesn't really get triggered by that, it's important to like tap out. So I was a teacher last year, and my co-teacher like was so triggered if a kid was sassy to her. Like that didn't bug me, so we would like switch in and out. Or if a kid was really mean to other kids, like that would trigger me, so we would switch in and out. So if you have that ability, I think that's really important to do. How I like to feel my own feelings. A book that a therapist recommended to me is The Art of Self-Compassion by Kristin Neff. Highly recommend if you're working on your own emotional regulation skills, and the steps for emotional regulation from Kristin Neff were mindfulness, common humanity, and self-compassion. So if you're having a feeling, be mindful of it. Notice where it is in your body. What does it feel like? If you breathe into the feeling, how does that change? And then the next step is viewing the feeling from a lens of common humanity. So many people experience this feeling. I'm not alone in this feeling. It's normal to feel like this. And then the last step is self-compassion, which is talking yourself through the feeling like you would want someone to talk to you or how you would talk to a friend. So viewing it for yourself from those lenses can kind of help you work through that feeling and regulate emotionally for yourself. Okay, so the next thing that's really important is preparing and preventing dysregulation. So if you are just going into a kid who's dysregulated, and you're like, let's take a deep breath, but they've never taken a deep breath before, that's not gonna work because they're asking, am I safe and am I loved? They're not asking, oh, can I learn right now? So it's important to do these things before kids get dysregulated. The first thing that's really important is talk about your feelings. You can read books about your feelings. If you're watching a movie, you can be like, oh, how is that person feeling? How is that person feeling? Another really big thing you can do is model handling big feelings. So you could say something like, Mommy is feeling so mad that this book fell down or whatever. I am going to take some deep breaths. So if you're modeling yourself having big feelings and they see that and they're like, whoa, I can do that too. You can also recognize the signals in your body. So like I notice that when I get anxious, like I click my nails. So I would say to a kid, oh, I noticed that I'm clicking my nails. That tells me something's making me feel worried. But if you're noticing how your body signals, and this is something we did in pre-K and preschool, is we talked about the different feelings and noticing like where we feel them in our body, like in our arms. That was a big one because I said, I feel mad and my arms get tight, and then all the kids were like, when I get mad, my arms get tight. So I think that's really big too, to just notice it for yourself so your kids can see that. You can also add breath work into your daily routine. That's something we do in chapel. We did like the balloon breaths. Another breath I really like is the butterfly breath. So you just put one hand here, and you tap and breathe because that crosses the midline. That can help calm kids a lot. So working on that in the morning or at dinner time rather than when they're really upset is important. You can also learn your child's triggers. So if you know that if your child wakes up late and then you rush them, then they're really dysregulated, you can remember that and try your best not to have that happen or things like that. And then figuring out which tools, we'll get to tools, I think the slide after this. You can figure out which tool they like before they're dysregulated. So maybe your kid really likes to be squeezed, like deep pressure is really helpful for them. If you know that before, then when they're dysregulated, it's easier to use that tool. Okay, so when your child is dysregulated, here is what you can do. The first thing, your child's brain is flipped, and flipped brains can't learn a new skill. So it's not the time to like be thrown at them, oh, here's what we can learn from this or anything like that, because it's not gonna work. They're dysregulated, they're freaking out, they can't do it. It's also important to remember that you as a parent are in control. You got it, you can take a deep breath, you can handle it, I know you can. And then get on your child's level. If you're making eye contact with them and you're down like on the floor with them, it's easier to regulate with them. Downloading calm, so our brains have mirror neurons, so if you see someone crying, it might make you cry, for example, or when you see someone happy, you might smile. That works if you're calming down too. So if you're on their level and they're seeing you take deep breaths, that can help them kind of do the same thing. They're downloading the calm into their brains. And then if you whisper, so like if a kid's yelling at you and you whisper and get really quiet, then they have to get quiet too, like engage with you. Some kids really cannot handle language when they're dysregulated. So instead of being like, oh, you're so mad, sometimes kids will just start going off. And in that moment, I wouldn't recommend being like, oh, you're so mad, and keep talking to them. If you notice that, you can just be like, oh, wow. This is something I struggle with because I love to talk. But I think it's a very good skill if you notice your kid is not responding to any language. Just lose your language and be empathetic in a way that doesn't use words. Name it to tame it. That's just naming their feelings or naming the feeling that you see. So your body is going like this, your face is going like this. That tells me you might be feeling really mad right now. That's a phrase that I feel like we use all the time in ECC. So your kids are probably familiar with it. But once you name the feeling, it's easier to work through it. Acknowledge and validate, saying things like, it makes sense that you feel that way. If your kid is in the emotional state and they're looking to feel loved, you can say, I love you, we can get through this, I know you can handle this. It's normal to feel that way, I feel that way sometimes too. And then the last thing I would recommend is trying a tool. So breathing, grounding, sensory input, sensory output, etc. I think that's the next slide. Oh, just kidding. This is if your kid is having dysregulation along with behaviors. So if you're seeing a lot of hitting, kicking, screaming, yelling at you, and you want to change that behavior, this is a quick little method you can remember for that. It's feelings, limits, inquiries, prompts. So the feeling, you're gonna name it and validate it. Your face is like this, that tells me you might be feeling mad. It's okay to feel mad, I get mad sometimes too. And then if they're hitting you set a boundary in a positive way. So we use safe hands at home. Instead of saying no hitting or don't hit, you have to flip it and make it more of like a positive thing. So we use safe hands at home. Inquiries, you ask them what they would like to do instead. What else can I do? And if they can't come up with an answer to that, then you would prompt them. So would you like to hit a pillow or squeeze my hand? And you can also do it like, when I feel mad, hitting a pillow helps me feel better. So flipping it onto yourself and telling them like what would help you in that situation. Okay, here's the tool. So something I recommend is having like pictures of feeling faces.
Yeah, take a picture of this.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
No worries.
I can email this out to you all too. Yeah.
Please.
Yes, no problem.
Yeah, so feeling faces, if you just Google conscious discipline feeling faces, you can see the ones that we have here, or just any feeling faces would work. You can even take pictures of your kid, like happy, sad, mad, scared, and then have them point to it if they're unable to tell you how they're feeling. Sometimes it's easier for them to point. Some kids need sensory experiences when they're dysregulated. So if you see them like rubbing like the carpet or like thrashing around, they might need sensory input, which would be like deep pressure, so giving them squeezes. Some kids really like if you like squeeze their head like this, like it feels weird and you're like, I'm gonna break your head off, but you won't. They just really like that deep pressure. That or a weighted blanket is another sensory input activity. They might need output if you see them like running or pushing or trying to like run out the door or run or hitting or whatever. So some things that would give them sensory output in a safe way are stomping their feet really hard, jumping really hard. You can just have them like shake. Shaking is a really regulating thing, or pushing on the wall. So if you like just print handprints, and then they could just push on those handprints. You could be like, oh, I bet you can't move the wall, or I bet I can do more push-ups than you, because that's really like allowing their sensory or their arms to like output all the sensory experiences they're having. Some kids might like grounding. So something that I feel like has been pretty effective is ice packs. So usually like after like 5 to 10 minutes, if the kids can't calm down with all the other things, I'll get an ice pack and you can put it on the back of their neck or on their wrist or on their chest, and that's really regulating for worries or anxiety. That's really regulating for grown-ups too if you feel yourself having a lot of anxiety. Breathing, you could have a pinwheel, or if you look at conscious discipline breathing icons, that's like the balloon breath that we did this morning, and there's a pretzel breath you can do. There's lots of different breaths, or you can come up with your own. If your kid like loves pizza, you can do a pizza breath where you smell the pizza and blow it out. Or if you just Google different breaths, you can find a lot of them. Also the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. If you have an older kid and they're super dysregulated, you can have them name 5 things they see, 4 things they feel, 3 things they hear, 2 things they smell, and 1 thing that they can taste. Also songs. Daniel Tiger is always on my Spotify Wrapped because I'm always playing Daniel Tiger when you feel so mad you want to roar. It's a good one if your kid has a lot of anger. That's a good song that you can sing with them.
Is that what you put on for dinner parties?
Absolutely, yeah. Daniel Tiger's favorite. And then social medias that I recommend. There's Dr. Chelsea _parenting on TikTok. She goes through like a lot of situations and then tells you exactly how to handle them. It's super helpful. I love her. And then Big Little Feelings on Instagram. They share a lot of good things too. And then Dusty and on TikTok. They might say bad words, so just like warning. But those are some social medias I recommend.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Finlay. We'll allow questions for the end, but before Mrs. Fisher starts talking about boundaries, do you have any specific questions that are burning in your mind?
I have a question about the anger and like what the appropriate options are. So like when we're hitting and kicking, I want to make sure I'm giving, when we say appropriate responses, like things that would be acceptable at school. So I know you mentioned like pushing, hitting a pillow, but other things that you would recommend here that would also be good, like something if he's angry on the playground, like maybe stomping your feet was another one.
Yep, stomping or jumping really hard. Like how hard can you jump so hard that the floor breaks? Or can you push on, like outside we could do like the play structure. Can you push on the slide so hard that it moves? So you could do a wall at home. Just anything like pushing, stomping, anything really hard, you know? So. Good question.
Anything else? All right, Mrs. Fisher. Mrs. Fisher is one of our amazing preschool teachers, and she's going to talk about the importance
And
of
I'm
boundaries.
feeling, recognizing my emotions, that I'm very nervous. So I'm taking a breath and I'm saying a prayer. I think,
Yeah, woo-woo.
I think it's really, really important to remember, this leads really nicely into boundaries, that emotional regulation is so important. But if you do not have clear boundaries, emotional regulation is almost impossible. If you don't know what your parameters are, and this is where you're allowed to express your feelings, then I'm gonna go all the way over here. So boundaries is important. Which leads to my PowerPoint here. Maslow before you bloom. Everything is harder if our basic needs are not met first. If your child is hungry, if they have not had enough sleep, if their shoe has a sock that's bunched up and it's bothering them all day, this is gonna be your kiddo's basic needs. And if those are not met, everything is gonna be harder, including setting boundaries. When we have boundaries, it helps our brain. It lowers stress, it lowers anxiety, and that is when emotional regulation happens. That is when we can set boundaries. Clear and consistent boundaries help children learn. Boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. Parents, this is one of the most important things that we do as teachers and that you can do as parents. The first day of school, I ask parents not to walk in the room because I'm already setting a boundary. This is my space. You may not act like you do at home a lot of times. Boundaries. It means your rules, your limits, and what you expect of their behavior in your home and outside of your home. If you allow your child, your boundary might be, it's okay for them to eat dinner underneath your table. But you have set that boundary, and then expect it to be okay when you go to a restaurant, or when you go to grandparents' house, because you've set that precedent. Boundaries are, don't throw your food on the floor, don't stand on the table. No, you can't have Skittles for dinner. Every time you make a decision, you're either telling your child, aha, there's a little wiggle room. You might test this next time, or no, this is not the boundary. This is exhausting for teachers, for parents, but the minute your child sees there's a little wiggle room, they are going to test every single time. So like Miss Fendler was saying, you need to tag out, that's fine. You and your partner, whoever that is, or a grandparent or whoever, you have to be on the same page. Because if you say yes, and the other person says no, that is confusing. That level of anxiety goes up, stress on your child goes up, because now I don't know what to expect. Their brains are developing. So when our brains are developing, we need clear parameters, and they're learning from you. Learning ice cream when your child is having a tantrum on the floor and you've given them a cookie because for the love of God, you just need them to stop. Oh no, you made your life so much harder. Let them scream. The answer is still no, because now you are going to have it for a lot longer in the future. And not having clear boundaries does cause your child stress and anxiety. Not good for brain development. Definitely not good when you're trying to teach emotional regulation. Boundaries show your child. I know a lot of people say, like, I feel mean, or, oh, just this once. You have to think of boundaries as, here's the boundary. Now my child knows, I got this. You are not in charge, I am. You can trust me to take it from you. And that's what your child needs. Consistent and predictable boundaries build trust and reduce anxiety. Children want to do the right thing. And when they have rules, and when we're consistent, and when we're consistent, it helps them to learn. It helps them to know the right thing. With predictable and consistent boundaries, they know what to expect. They're not reading. They're not able to follow the rules. They're taking their cues and the rules from you. And when that is met, we child is regulated. If you are movable, and this is hard, they're gonna test. But when you're unmovable, you know, I got this. And even though you might have a big behavior, but that is not going to change the outcome, that is when you set a boundary. And the person who makes the boundaries are you. That is good, and it is also very, very hard. Children want to do the right thing. And as we've said, when people are inconsistent, and when we're unsure of what the right thing is, kids will have inconsistent boundaries. And when we stay the course, or when you and your partner or your person is on the same page, the child knows what to expect. And again, you make your boundaries. Your boundaries don't have to be what someone else's boundaries are. You get to decide this. But think about your decisions, because your decisions will impact beyond just your house. It's when you go in public, it's when you go to a restaurant, it's when you come to school. And your children are very, very capable of learning boundaries. You see a lot of times parents will say, like, my child acts different at school than they do at home. Boundaries at school are set very clearly most of the time. And it's a lot different to set them at home. We are set up in an environment that is rules, routines, procedures. Home doesn't work like that. I'm a parent, I get it. It's hard. Children must be taught acceptable behavior. When you see a child doing something unacceptable, your child decides to take off outside the front door and run through the neighborhood butt naked. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, what are my neighbors thinking, right? Oh my gosh, but your child is thinking, ooh, the wind, this feels good. But they have not been taught. Okay, come back in, you're not choosing bad behavior. They've never done this before, so I don't know if it's bad. It's, hey, you have to wear clothes outside, you set a boundary. Your child is saying, I want ice cream for dinner, I want ice cream for dinner. No, we don't have ice cream for dinner. You know, until you eat your always food first, or whatever you choose. They don't know that they can't have ice cream for dinner. They are learning, and they're learning from you. So when you set those boundaries, everything becomes a lot easier. Remember, children do not know what is acceptable until we teach them. A lot with emotional regulation too. Little Johnny might be throwing a fit, and you might be saying, oh my gosh, he is kicking and screaming. He doesn't know how to handle his emotions, and I haven't set boundaries. Stop. You may not hit. Come here. You may get a hug, or you may go sit and take a break. That is your choice. That is the boundary I've created. It never should have went that far. I did not set the boundary. So, parents, really, really important. Your children can't read, they can't write yet for a lot of them, so they're learning. They're learning from their surroundings, but the most important person they are learning from is you. Everything you do with you and your spouse, in your house, outside in public, if you are kind, if you are also following the rules, and what your words and your actions are. They are learning from you. So,
No pressure.
no pressure at all. Yeah. So, the golden rule of boundaries is clear and consistent boundaries help children learn and thrive. The good news is you get to set these. So you have to figure out what works for you, and then we're here to support you. Do you have any questions? Do you feel a lot of pressure? Yes?
Did you say always food?
Always.
Oh, so you're like point.
There's food, yes, oh, I always call always food and sometimes food, so that a negative feeling isn't attached to food. But however you say it is fine, but in our classroom, I always say like, you're always foods, you're sometimes foods, thanks to Miss Lane.
All right, any more questions for Mrs. Fisher? All right, thank you, Mrs. Fisher. I made it. Mrs. Fisher is the queen of setting boundaries, but I will say, she does it with like such love and care too, which is really fun to see. And it's definitely taught me as a human, like, you can set boundaries and still be compassionate and empathetic to your kiddo. And you just have to remember, you can do it.
Boundaries
right.
are hard.
Boundaries are so hard.
It's a tough one. But Miss Fisher does it great.
Yes, for sure. Okay, so one topic that keeps coming up in requests whenever we collect feedback is screen time. Parents, you all were really feeling like you needed some guidance here. I know I, as a parent, have sought guidance in this area before. We don't really have a resident screen time expert. I feel like all of our teachers are really good at managing it in the classroom, and a lot of them are really good at managing it as parents too. But I wanted to get this information to you, but I'm coming at it with humility and saying that if you look in my house, I have an 11, 14-year-old at any given moment, it is not best practice 100% of the time. So this is what we are all striving to do with screen time. I feel like we had a pretty good system and boundary set pre-COVID, and then they became blurred a lot with screen time. So again, it's what we all are striving to do as parents. I love this quote. There's no perfect way to embark on this journey. There will certainly be hiccups along the road. However, it's never too early to start preparing your family for the digital world. So even the experts say that there is not perfection in this way. And I think with any parenting, one thing I've learned as a parent is that what works really well for me in my house, that exact same thing might not work at all for another parent. There are, so in this great experiment of parenting, there are so many variables, right? There are variables, how many people are home at once. There's variables of how long your commute is to school and how that can help you regulate. There are millions of variables and you can't control them. So you as parents have to kind of set a goal and find what works for you. I would love to tell you that a specific guideline, such as like, okay, 30 minutes of screen time every day and then you're done, and that's what research says is best, but that doesn't really exist. You can set that rule for your house, and the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends 0 screen time for 2 and under, and no more than 2 hours a day for 2 to 5. That's their recommendation, but even their recommendation is kind of like the experts say, we don't really know, we're just grabbing this so that you have some kind of guide, right? It's not exactly like research based. But here, if you go to that research slide, and then I'll come back to this, here's what research does tell us, which can be a guiding light. We know that all children learn better face to face, even the same person doing the same thing. So research studies have shown that if I'm on a screen teaching a child about the letter sound of A, what the letter looks like in the sound, and I do the exact same lesson in person, the children respond better and learn more from the in-person version than the screen. One of these reasons is that research shows that children aged 0 to 3 seem to view video as irrelevant to human life. So for example, if they're watching a video about ocean animals, it's nearly impossible for them to connect that to the actual ocean. They can do that starting at 3, so there are benefits, but the research shows that it's just too hard for them to grasp the concept. Okay, this is on the screen, but it's also actually real, okay? Research also shows that when a child 0 to 3 does have a screen, learning increases with an adult participating with them. That is a common theme. So we know that not all screen time is bad, right? Technology can do a lot of wonderful things for us and for our kids. One of the common themes with research is that if an adult is next to them, guiding them through whatever they're doing, that definitely does have benefits. And we'll talk more about that. Here's what else we know. We know that children aged 3 to 5 do demonstrate learning from slow-paced, thoughtfully designed children's media. So the research study I was going through was based on PBS Kids Super Y, and they introduced kids to, all the kids had the same instruction at school, but they introduced some of them to Super Y, and those kids learn their letters faster, like pretty consistently. And it also applies to social emotional skills. Mrs. Spinlove mentioned Daniel Tiger earlier. We all love Daniel Tiger, but research shows that kids who are exposed to Daniel Tiger actually score better with social emotional skills than kids who don't in the research study. So we know that once children are 3, it can be beneficial for kids. So today we're just going to talk about how to try to be intentional with that. academic and social emotional skills can grow. That's what it shows. But even here, it shows that co-viewing is still most beneficial to kids. Now, unfortunately, this isn't what we usually use technology for as parents. Like at this age where your kids need so much supervision, need so much support, and you have a million other things to do. A lot of time it's, I just have to give my other kid a bath. So this is what kid number one is gonna do safely so I can handle it. So we're not expecting perfection. Just keep in mind that if you sit down with them and watch Daniel Tiger and you talk through what's happening, and you be like, oh, that reminds me of this time when I was feeling really mad. Here's what I did. That shows greater learning gains than just by themselves. Again, not always realistic, but that's what research shows. Do you want to go back to that drive? Okay. So this is a wonderful resource. This is actually a group that started in Kansas City. I have a link in here to this preschool plugged in planner. They came in and talked to our parent group pre-COVID, especially parents of older kids, and just about screen time and how to handle it. And then of course COVID happened and everyone's like, well, the only time you can see grandma is if you FaceTime, so that's kind of out the window. But this is a great resource. So this is a group that started in Kansas City. They have a lot of tools and videos available online, but what I love is that they have like a middle school plugged-in planner and a preschool plugged-in planner, so they really scaffold the information by age because it's such a different situation. So a lot of the information that's in this slide came from Screen Sanity. I want to make sure I'm giving them the shout out they deserve. They have great tools online. So here's one way to think about screen time, whether it's with your 3-year-old now, with your 7-year-old in 4 years, whether it's with your 15-year-old when they get to high school. What Screen Sanity says is to think about it just like when we learn to drive, okay? So think back when you learned to drive. First, as a little kid, you rode in cars with other drivers, experienced drivers, and you were observing the whole time, everything they did. Remember, it's like what Mrs. Fisher said, no pressure, they're watching everything you do, right? And then, after you rode for a while, you were able to practice. You got your learner's permit, and with an experienced driver next to you, you practiced driving until you became expert enough to drive on your own. Then you started driving on your own. So their philosophy is to really approach screen time like this, because we have to teach our kids how to use it safely and effectively and how to model positive emotions or comfortable emotions while they're using it. So they say that, for example, if you have a 2-year-old who's just starting to really be exposed, first they've been watching you use your screens for 2 years, okay? So they've done that and they'll continue to watch you too. But then it's time to practice with them. So maybe that's where watching something with them, or the first 5 minutes of something with them comes in, talking through it, and then give your other kid a bath, okay? So you're practicing with them so they're ready to drive on their own. This is especially helpful, I feel like I have, like I said, an 11 and a 14-year-old. My 14-year-old just got on social media for the first time, and I really follow this with her because that's a lot. It's a lot to be able to regulate your emotions if you're seeing everything, the best of everything else laid out in front of you. So it's a great analogy all through tech time. All right, I also want to say, like, screen time isn't all bad, right? So I told you those research benefits that screens use. We can use this as an amazing tool. So what I'm going to ask you to think about is think of a time in your childhood or with your own kids when you've had a really positive screen time experience. Like my example is that when my kids were little, we lived in Fort Lauderdale, and our family was in the Midwest. So we would actually use Skype, I saw it on here, because it was before FaceTime, and every week, like regularly, we would FaceTime with my parents. It was such a benefit to my parents, I think, to kind of see the progress with the kids. Technology can be positive. We just want to try to be intentional. And I'm sure you have positive experiences too. Okay, so I have, I think, 4 tips that I'm going to give you that you can hopefully walk away with and think about as you're kind of planning your screen time plan with your kids. The very first tip is that sometimes a lot of experts say it's not so much what the kids are doing on the screen, but what they're not doing because they're on a screen. So So think about that, your time with them, you so much want to prioritize the connection that you have with them. We are all seeking connection, it's like what Miss Love said, we're all giving love, we're wanting to receive it. That is such an important thing that our kids need, and we don't want anything, including screens, to get in the way of us connecting with them. So I have this, I don't know, have you ever heard of the still face experiment? It's kind of hard to watch, it's about 2.5 minutes, but we're gonna watch it. If you don't mind to click the link and then start at like 25 seconds. So.
In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age. And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her. This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she
Smart baby, right? Like our babies are so smart.
The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get a normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Watch how quickly too. So hard to watch.
I think it's that she turned around and turned back around and made it creep.
Yeah, that's I think so telling though, one, about how at such a young age, our kids know how to seek connection, and it is so important to them. Now we're super nerds. And they, even at a young age, they know how to do it, and it is so important to them. Like dysregulation, sometimes, not always, but it could be related to that. And so connection is the #1 thing we can get them. So it doesn't mean your kid can't have any screen time. It just means make the most of the time you have with them. Really work on connecting face to face, getting down with them, talking through it every day. Okay? Not so much about what they're doing on the screen, but what they're not doing when they're on the screen. All right, we can go to the next slide. So just take a moment to think about like how and when do you connect with your child? It's different for all of us. First of all, what are the times, and thinking about that, think about the times and spaces that you hope will be device free. My kids know that the car is device free zone. They are not allowed to be on their screen during the car because that is a solid like 30 minutes we have every day where they are forced to talk to me because there's nothing else to do in the car. So think about those times where you can really connect with your kids and make those device free. Just set the boundary now that there are no screens and everyone has to follow it, which is a hard thing. Second, what are the times in the day where you have the most opportunity for meaningful connection? What time of the day, whether it's bedtime, whether it's on the car ride home from school, do you have an opportunity? And again, make that device free, make sure that you're dedicating that to connecting. And then you can come up with like your own family's like sayings, right? I like this example. Phone time ends when we are with our friends. So if you're getting together with friends, if you're having a play date, if you're with family, just know that this is device free. Again, it might not be a rule that works for your family, but there's one somewhere that will work for your family of device free times. So tip 2, this all starts with us, right? Our kids are watching us. It's a lot of pressure. We're all going to mess up, but it's really important that you create healthy habits for yourself. And I love this because like the books mention like, hey, there's no magic wand for this, but you can be intentional and do some things to help you. And then I Google searched an image for a magic wand and a phone came up with it, which is like kind of ironic and funny. But a few tips just to create healthy habits for yourself. one, just reduce the amount of notifications that you have so your phone's not going off all the time. Two, I think that, I don't know, I've been thinking about this one personally for a while. It seems like we would add more technology with the smartwatch, but I think for some of us, it might mean that you don't have to have your phone with you all the time. So you can filter out, you know, the people that you have to respond to right away and the people that you don't, and your phone will help you filter that out. I like that one. It's one that I might actually cross over the smartwatch over to that team and try it. Give your phone a spring cleaning, especially on that first page. If there are apps that are distracting to you, that you know, like, hey, I have 5 minutes, my kid's right here, but I'm gonna be so tempted to open this app that it's gonna be hard to connect with them, just get rid of them. Or put them like on the last page where you have to think before you access them a little bit. You can also think about obstacles. This is proven to be really effective. Like if you create an obstacle for your phone. I mean, I know I just pick up my phone like automatically if it's there and I'm not doing anything else. But if you are strategic about where you put it, it could help us all. Again, I'm coming at this with humility. You're gonna see me on my phone. All right, next. Tip 3. So after you create healthy habits for yourself, think about creating those healthy habits for your kids. Technology is not going away. Our kids are only gonna have more of it when they get older. So it's really about not saying you can only have this amount of time, but what are the habits they need to learn? And maybe that's stepping away after 10 minutes. Maybe that does involve time, but that's the important thing. So you can create your own rules, but set them so your kids know. And then you've already set that boundary. So many connections among our presentation. And they know that that's a boundary that they can't cross. Like no screens before noon, or no screens after a certain time. A little bedtime mantra, like tablet up, teeth brushed, books read, time for bed, so that they know when they start that bedtime routine, the tablet's up. Set the tech timer. I do like our kids respond to timers really well in a lot of ways, and I think that skill of like walking away from something that can have like positive effects on our brain, being able to do that is a translatable skill to a lot of areas, and a timer can help your kiddo do that more independently too. Okay, and then the last tip, which is actually tip 4, I remembered it, not tip 5. I mean, this one is just to rethink meltdowns. So again, all of these things are connected. When you think about self-regulation, the skill, the long game is what's important. So if your kiddo is having a tantrum because you're having a long conversation that's really important with someone and they're not getting the attention, the long game is important. And rather than being tempted to hand them a tablet or a phone, just taking the time to say, hey, I'm so sorry, I need to deal with this right now, and using some of the skills that Ms. Finlock gave to regulate rather than just trying to get through it. We can't do that all the time. Like there are things that demand our attention, but trying to increase the amount of time that you actually co-regulate with your kiddo instead of just handing them a screen. Because we all know screens are like the ultimate regulator, but it's not really teaching them the skills. It's just like a Band-Aid. All right, questions for any of us about this? Yes.
Okay, so to be totally open and